Beloved community, wherever you are at this moment, may the peace of Christ be yours. What a time it is to hear this story from John's Gospel, to hear about Jesus' curative touch when we are being asked to stay 6 feet away from one another, to hear about an experience of physical restoration when we are facing a pervasive illness and rising death tolls. And yet there is so much in this ancient story that feels so relevant to right now. This is a story about a man miraculously receiving sight, but it is also a story about judgment, stigma, fear, and isolation. The unnamed man at the center of this story had been blind since birth. His physical difference had always set him apart from others in his community. His whole life, he had been navigating a society that was set up for sighted people. He had been forced to beg just to get by. This man already knew what it was to be isolated. And then this whole incident with Jesus happens. Jesus gives him sight for the first time, but somehow this actually isolates him more. People had been publicly accusing him of being sinful because of his blindness. But even after he receives sight, people continue publicly accusing him of being sinful because of his association with Jesus. His parents are so afraid of stigma that they won't even stand up for him. And his neighbors are so caught up in their own bias that they don't even recognize him. This person who they've passed by so many times before. But they've only ever seen him as his blindness. They've only ever seen him as his begging. His community might have the literal, physical ability to see, but they certainly seem to lack the ability to see him as a person. They may have the literal, physical ability to hear, but they lack the ability to listen to what he tells them. No one seems to understand when he continues answering their incessant questions about what has happened to him. In the end, their fear and judgment get the better of them, and they drive him out of the community. This man was isolated when he was blind, and he is isolated when he can see. He's isolated, but he's not alone, because Jesus meets him where he is. While others are pontificating about whose sin is responsible for this man's condition, Jesus outright rejects any moral condemnation and praises this man's embodiment of God's glory, just as he is. While others ignore and reject this man, Jesus reaches out to him, touches him with healing hands, even when the Sabbath laws forbid doing so. While others distance themselves from this man, Jesus draws close to him. And when Jesus hears that he has been isolated completely, kicked out of the community, Jesus goes out to find him. Everyone else questioned this man's experience. Why were you blind? Who gave you sight? How did this happen? But Jesus simply asks him, "Do you trust me?" This man doesn't have all the answers. Actually, he repeatedly admits how much he doesn't know. But he does know his own experience. He knows that Jesus has changed him, and he knows that Jesus is trustworthy. When Jesus finds him in isolation, he says, "Lord, I trust you." And that is no small thing. Consider just how significantly this man's entire life has been upended since he encountered Jesus. Imagine what a radical change it would be to suddenly have a sense you'd never had before. This man is seeing everything for the very first time. That must have been confusing, overwhelming, terrifying. The life he knew is gone, and now he is living in a completely different world. This new life will open up possibilities for him, and he certainly seems grateful for his sense of sight. But still, The loss that this transformation entails is unavoidable. The world he knew since birth is gone. His relationships with his family, his neighbors, his religious community have been damaged, perhaps permanently. And it is clear that declaring faith in Jesus puts him at odds with the Jewish officials as well as the Roman imperial powers. Stating that he believes in Jesus is an enormous leap of faith. And he takes that leap because he has encountered the light of the world. Who could not be changed by that? The pool where Jesus commanded him to wash is called Siloam, which means sent. And that is this man's fate now. He is sent out into the world to bear the same light he encountered in Christ. He can't go back to the life he had before. He can only go forward into the life God has called him into, even when the way forward is difficult, grief-filled, or lonely. The God he trusts will go with him every step of the way, and the testimony he bears about how he has been changed will bring God glory. Beloved ones, know that this is true for you as well. When you are sent into a world so radically different from the one you knew before, God goes with you. And know that the testimony of your life, just as it is a treasure to God. These are times filled with fear, filled with questions, but you do not have to have all the answers, all the explanations. Trust that your experience can be a reminder to you that Christ will meet you where you are, even in your isolation. The light of the world shines even in the darkest of times. May it shine within you, around you, and through you. Amen.